I need you to stop whatever you're doing right now and answer one question. If your mother-in-law was kidnapped from her bed, dragged out of her home in the middle of the night, blood left on the doorstep, her pacemaker ripped offline at 2:28 a.m., the FBI releasing footage of a masked gunman at her front door, your wife sobbing on national television begging whoever took her mother to bring her back alive, would you wait 17 days to show up? 17 days. Not 17 hours, not 17 minutes, 17 days, because that's exactly what happened in the Nancy Guthrie case. And the man who waited those 17 days isn't the one being called a prime suspect on every cable news show in America. He isn't the one whose car was towed. He isn't the one whose home was searched. He isn't the one whose bandmate had to hide in a dark bedroom because strangers showed up at his door. No. The man who waited 17 days is married to the most powerful morning show anchor in the country. He co-founded a crisis communications firm with a former White House press secretary. He spent 8 years in the Clinton-Gore White House advising the Vice President of the United States on what to say when the world is watching. And when he finally landed in Tucson, 17 days after his mother-in-law vanished, a photographer caught him at the airport and he said 3 words that should have set off alarms in every newsroom in America. He said he felt mostly unhelpful and nobody blinked. Meanwhile, a high school biology teacher who makes homemade pasta and plays bass in a local band had his entire life destroyed on live television within 72 hours. Same family, same missing woman, same case, 2 completely different sets of rules. And what I'm about to show you is why that double standard might be the most important detail in this entire investigation that nobody is willing to touch. Before I can explain why the silence around Michael Feldman matters, you need to understand what happened to Tomaso Chion, because the contrast is the story. And once you see it laid out in sequence, you will not be able to look at this case the same way. Nancy Guthrie was last seen alive on the evening of January 31st. In 2026, she had dinner at the home of her daughter Annie and Annie's husband Tomaso Chion. Someone dropped her off at approximately 9:50 p.m. By the next morning, Nancy didn't show up for church. By noon, the family called 911. By evening, the Pima County Sheriff's Department and the FBI had classified the home as a crime scene. Blood confirmed as Nancy's was found at the front door and on the porch tiles. Her Google Nest doorbell camera had been ripped from its bracket and smashed. Her pacemaker disconnected at 2:28 a.m. Her medication was untouched. Her phone was still inside. Tomaso Chion was there from day one. He was in Tucson. He was present. He was available. He cooperated fully with investigators from the very first hour. And then 72 hours later, his world collapsed. Day 3. Ashley Banfield, the former CNN anchor, she went on her podcast and cited a law enforcement source who called Tomaso a prime suspect, not a person of interest, not someone investigators wanted to speak with, a prime suspect. That language hit the internet like a bomb. Within hours, TMZ picked it up. The Daily Beast ran with it. The Hollywood Reporter published it. Dozens of outlets followed. Tomaso Chion, a man who had been teaching teenagers AP biology for over 15 years, was suddenly the most hated man in America. Day 5. Sheriff Chris Nanos held a press conference specifically to address the reporting. He called it reckless. He said no suspect or person of interest had been identified, but by then, the damage was catastrophic and irreversible. Days 6 through 14. Tomaso's car was towed from his home and placed into evidence. His house was searched by FBI agents. Investigators made multiple visits to his neighborhood. His bandmate, Dominic Evans, a man whose only connection to this case was knowing Tomaso, was falsely identified by internet detectives as a possible accomplice. Strangers showed up at Evans' house. He told the New York Times he spoke to investigators for 40 minutes about a crime he knew nothing about. Evans had to sit in his bedroom with the lights off because people were outside. Day 16, Sheriff Nanos publicly cleared all family members, including siblings and spouses. He issued a statement saying that to suggest otherwise was not only wrong, it was cruel. But the clearing didn't matter. Megyn Kelly kept the narrative alive on day 20 from her Sirius XM show. Reddit threads continued dissecting every detail of Tomaso's life. International outlets from India to Brazil were running stories questioning whether the biology teacher had really been cleared. His students knew, his colleagues knew, his neighbors knew. Everyone who had ever met Tomaso Chion now associated his name with the worst crime imaginable. That is what happened to the son-in-law who showed up on day 1. Now let me tell you what happened to the son-in-law who showed up on day 17. Michael Feldman was born on October 14, 1968. He graduated from Tufts University with a degree in political science. He did not become a teacher. He went directly into the machinery of American political power and never left. Senate floor assistant, legislative analyst, Clinton campaign staffer. Then, after Clinton won, he was appointed Deputy Director of Legislative Affairs for Vice President Al Gore. 4 years later, promoted to Senior Advisor and Traveling Chief of Staff to the Vice President of the United States of America. 8 consecutive years in the White House. When the Gore administration ended, Feldman co-founded the Glover Park Group with Carter Eskew, Chip Smith, and Joe Lockhart. Lockhart was the White House press secretary under Bill Clinton. He literally stood behind the podium in the briefing room and spoke to the nation on behalf of the president. Together, these men built a firm whose entire purpose was managing narratives during crisis, communication strategy, government relations, corporate advocacy, and crisis management. When Johnny Depp needed someone to manage public perception during his defamation trial, the call went to Feldman's team. The firm later merged into FGS Global, so where Feldman currently serves as North American co-chairman. His estimated net worth sits between $5 and $7 million. His wife earns approximately $8 million per year from NBC. That is the man who waited 17 days to fly to Tucson after his mother-in-law was kidnapped. Let me walk you through the timeline again, because the silence in this timeline is deafening. January 31st. Nancy Guthrie disappears. February 1st. FBI and sheriff's deputies classify the home as a crime scene. Blood confirmed. Doorbell camera destroyed. Pacemaker offline. Over the next 16 days, Savannah Guthrie posts tearful videos. She appears on camera, voice breaking, begging for her mother's return. Cameron makes statements. Annie stands with her siblings holding hands, pleading. The FBI releases doorbell footage of a masked, armed man. 2 ransom notes arrive. $1 million reward is announced. This becomes the biggest missing persons case in the country. Where is Michael Feldman during all of this? He is presumably in New York, presumably going about his life while his wife's mother is missing and his wife is crying on television 1,000 miles away. On February 17th, day 17, Michael Feldman finally arrives at Tucson International Airport. He is photographed walking through the terminal in a gray sweatshirt and jeans, carrying 2 suitcases and a backpack. A photographer approaches him and asks about the case, and the man who spent 30 years training the most powerful people in the world on exactly what to say when everything falls apart said 3 things. He says he has nothing new to report. He says he is just being responsive, and he says he feels mostly unhelpful. Now, I need you to sit with those words for a moment, because they are not the words of a grieving family member. They are something else entirely. Nothing new to report. Family members don't use the word report. Family members say we don't know anything yet, or we're praying, or please help us find her. The word report belongs in briefing rooms and crisis management meetings. It implies he has been briefed. It positions him as someone receiving information, not someone drowning in grief. Just being responsive. It frames his presence as reactive rather than emotional. He is not there because he is devastated. He is there because he is responding. Responsive is a word that lives in client memos and corporate strategy documents. A grieving son-in-law doesn't say he's being responsive. A grieving son-in-law says, I had to be here. I couldn't stay in New York another second. Mostly unhelpful. This is the phrase that should have stopped every journalist in the country. Mostly is a qualifier that does enormous strategic work. It hedges. It manages expectations. It pre-frames whatever limited role he plays going forward. If he has already told the public he's mostly unhelpful, then nobody can question his involvement or lack thereof. It is an exit strategy built into a 3-word phrase, 15 words total across 3 phrases. Every single one of them pulled from the muscle memory of a man who has been doing this for 3 decades. A biology teacher would not talk like that. A biology teacher would stumble. A biology teacher would say something raw and imperfect. A crisis communications expert talks exactly the way Michael Feldman talked at that airport. Let me put this side by side so there is no ambiguity about what happened. Tomaso Chion, present from day 1, cooperated immediately, cleared by the sheriff on day 16. Result: named prime suspect on national television on day 3. Car towed, home searched, life destroyed, bandmate harassed, international media speculation, online vilification that continues to this day. Michael Feldman. I absent for 17 days, arrived with scripted language, gave 3 carefully constructed phrases at the airport. Result: sympathetic coverage, gentle headlines. Savannah Guthrie's husband hurries to Tucson to support wife. No questions about the delay, no questions about his whereabouts on January 31st, no questions about whether he gave DNA, no questions about whether he sat with investigators, no questions at all. Now let me ask you something. And I want you to be honest with yourself. If Tomaso Chion had been the one who waited 17 days, if the biology teacher who was already called a prime suspect had taken 2.5 weeks to show up while his family begged on television, what would the coverage look like? You already know the answer. And if Michael Feldman had been the one who dropped Nancy off that night, if the crisis communications expert had been the last person to see her alive, would Ashley Banfield have called him a prime suspect on day 3? Would his car have been towed in front of cameras? Would Megyn Kelly have gone on air and backed the narrative? You know that answer too. There are 3 reasons, and none of them are complicated. The first is access. Savannah Guthrie co-anchors NBC's Today Show. She is one of the most powerful people in American broadcast journalism. NBC has covered this story extensively and sympathetically. When Savannah was honored during the State of the Union coverage, her own network did the honoring. When Hoda Kotb came back from retirement to fill in for her, the studio was filled with yellow flowers and solidarity. No NBC journalist will ever ask why Savannah's husband waited 17 days. No competing network wants to antagonize one of the most prominent figures in their industry by scrutinizing her husband. That is not conspiracy. That is professional self-preservation. The second is power. Tomaso has no media connections, no crisis team, no political allies. When Banfield named him, he had zero mechanism to fight back. Michael Feldman can activate a network of Washington operatives with one phone call. His co-founder was Bill Clinton's press secretary. Everyone in media knows that questioning Feldman means questioning a man with the professional infrastructure to make your career very uncomfortable, so they don't. The third reason is class. Tomaso is an Italian-born biology teacher who plays bass and makes pasta. The internet didn't need much to build a villain. A foreign-born teacher who was the last person to see the victim alive is central casting for online suspicion. Michael Feldman is a Tufts-educated, Manhattan-based political consultant who co-chairs a global firm. He moves in the right rooms. He is, in the eyes of the media establishment, one of their own, and you do not eat your own. Every single one of these questions has a potentially innocent answer. I want to be clear about that before I list them, but the fact that not one journalist has asked any of them in 31 days while Tomaso's entire existence was dissected on live television is itself the scandal. Where was Michael Feldman on the night of January 31st, presumably New York? Has anyone confirmed this? Why did it take 17 days to fly to Tucson? His wife's mother was kidnapped. His wife was on television in tears. What kept him in Manhattan for over 2 weeks? The answer might be completely reasonable, but the question has never been asked. Has Michael Feldman provided a formal statement to the FBI? The sheriff said all family members cooperated. What does cooperation look like for a man 1,000 miles away? Has Michael Feldman provided DNA samples? Tomaso's car was towed. His home was searched 5 times. His devices were extracted. What was the equivalent process for Feldman? When the sheriff cleared all siblings and spouses, what was the basis for clearing someone who wasn't even in Arizona? Is the family's public messaging being professionally managed? Savannah's posts are emotionally devastating but strategically flawless. The reward announcement was timed perfectly. The statements contain no contradictions across platforms. Is this organic grief, or is it being shaped by one of the most capable communications professionals in the country? These are not accusations. These are the same category of questions that were asked about Tomaso on day 3. The only difference is that nobody has had the courage to ask them about Michael Feldman on day 31. I want to be absolutely clear about something. I am not accusing Michael Feldman of any involvement in the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. There is zero public evidence connecting him to this crime. He was cleared by the sheriff along with all family members. He is, by every available indication, a grieving son-in-law who loves his wife and is supporting his family through an unimaginable nightmare. But Tomaso Chion is also a grieving family member. Tomaso was also cleared. Tomaso also cooperated fully. Tomaso was also, by every available indication, an innocent man. And Tomaso's life was incinerated on national television while Michael Feldman walked through an airport with scripted talking points and received nothing but sympathy. The question this video asks is not about guilt or innocence. It is about something much bigger. It is about who in America gets questioned and who gets protected. It is about whose life can be destroyed by a podcast host with an anonymous source and whose life remains untouchable because of who they married, who they worked for, and whose phone numbers are saved in their contacts. Tomaso Chion is a man who teaches teenagers about mitosis and evolution. He studies lizards. He plays electric bass on weeknights. He has spent 15 years in the same school, showing up every morning, doing quiet work that nobody photographs. Michael Feldman is a man who helped navigate the 2000 election recount, who built a crisis firm with a former White House press secretary. Who advises global corporations on how to survive public scrutiny? Who walked through an airport on day 17 and delivered 3 phrases so perfectly calibrated that a communications professor could teach a semester on them? Same family, same missing woman, same investigation, same sheriff clearing both of them on the same day with the same statement. One had his entire life destroyed, the other had his feelings carefully protected. And I am apparently the first person in 31 days willing to say that out loud. Today is day 31. Nancy Guthrie is still missing. The masked man remains unidentified. The DNA is described as low-level and challenging. The FBI has moved from Tucson to Phoenix. Over 23,000 tips have produced no actionable leads. The $1 million reward remains unclaimed. No proof of life. Savannah herself has acknowledged her mother may already be gone. On March 2nd, Savannah, Annie and Tomaso were seen walking together to a memorial outside Nancy's home. They held each other. They laid flowers. They read messages from strangers who are praying for a woman they have never met. Michael Feldman was not in the photographs. If you have any information about the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or the Pima County Sheriff's Office at 52-035-14900. You can reach Tucson Crime Stoppers anonymously at 8888-TIP. The family has offered a $1 million reward for information leading to Nancy's safe return or to an arrest and conviction. Tips can be completely anonymous, cash or cryptocurrency. Someone out there knows something, and someone out there should start asking the questions that 31 days of cable news coverage has been too afraid to ask.